Here is Immortal Moments for explanation. Friends, like videos and subscribes to our channel. Tales of Herding Gods Episode 114 Explanation. So let's start our explanation. The directions of the clouds and wind were different. One was heading left, while the other was heading right. And in the sky where the two clouds were, the direction of the wind was completely different. It was unexpectedly blowing downwards. The only reason behind such a situation could be that the two clouds and the wind existed in a different space. From the clouds and wind, there were at least 3 layers of it. If the skies of Yudu, which was always in the darkness, or the hazy Fengdu had appeared, they would definitely be black or grey. Even though they weren't such, Qin Mu was certain that those two worlds were close by. This meant that the source of surging river might have 5 worlds overlapping one another. When night fell, darkness would invade, and the worlds would appear one after another, coming onto the bustling stage. When I have time, I will definitely need to go to the place where West Earth connects to Great Ruins. The darkness comes from there, so I might discover more secrets in that place. Qin Mu came down from the sky with his head aching. What exactly were those echoes of history? What were the worlds that were connected to the source of surging river? Where were the connecting points? There were many secrets in Great Ruins, and there also seemed to be quite a number of them in Surging River. Some secrets are something I can't touch or solve. If I try to do it by force, our lives would be put in danger. Let's go back to the village first. As they headed down the river, Xiu couldn't help sizing Qin Mu up. She couldn't resist asking curiously, "Cult Master Qin, did you really grow up in Great Ruins?" Qin Mu nodded and asked with puzzlement, "Why are you asking this? How did you survive in such a dangerous place? There are all kinds of strange beasts in Great Ruins, all kinds of strange things, dangers, and even the invasion of darkness at night, when devils and monsters wreak havoc. There are even other worlds overlapping with Great Ruins frequently. It's truly unimaginable for you to have survived up until now." Qin Mu smiled. "Big Sister Palace Master, you're mistaken. Great Ruins are actually very safe, much safer than the outside. The real danger lies outside. When I first walked out of Great Ruins and came to Eternal Peace, I stayed in an inn beside the river, and an incident happened that very night. That place was called Dike River County, and the people in the entire county died. Only me and Linga managed to escape. I had never met with such an incident in Great Ruins." Xiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You can't say that Eternal Peace is more dangerous than Great Ruins just because of that. It was only a coincidence. Ever since I entered Eternal Peace, I've suffered murderous intents and killings, as well as assassination attempts. In comparison, Great Ruins are much safer. The greatest danger I encountered in Great Ruins was also caused by the outside people barging in. Thus, Great Ruins is the safest place, Qin Mu explained with a calm expression. Xiu was puzzled. She didn't understand how he could feel that Great Ruins were safer than the outside world. The dragon Qilin chuckled. "Palace Master might not know, but when Cult Master goes out, he doesn't even dare to use his real name. This is because the moment he used his real name, people rushing to kill him would line up all the way from Eternal Peace Empire to disabled elderly village. The righteous practitioners are all itching to kill him." Qin Mu gave him a stare and immediately explained to Xiu, "Our heavenly saint cult is actually very righteous, so don't be misled. That's right, once we reach the village, I'll be able to get rid of your poison." "What do you plan to do after that?" Xiu was in a daze. Return to True Heaven Palace? Now that only her daughter was left, she didn't have the confidence to return to True Heaven Palace to seize the power and the position of the Palace Master back. On top of that, she was worried about Xiu's life. However, she couldn't accept giving up the foundation of her ancestor. Qin Mu caught the expression she made and smiled. "Even though I can get rid of your coiling poison, your cultivation won't recover straight away. I'll still need to help you recuperate and assist you in recovering your vital qi. If you can't make a decision, I have a suggestion. Why don't you follow me to Eternal Peace Empire for some time? I'm the academician of Imperial College, so I can recommend you to teach at Imperial College. Xiong Shiyu's beautiful gaze was like clear water as she looked deeply into his eyes, subconsciously giving off the aura of a mistress of a sacred ground. I'm the mistress of True Heaven Palace, and you are asking me to teach in Imperial College. Qin Mu thought for a moment and said, then why don't you come to our Heavenly Saint Cult School Hall to teach? Xiong Shiyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, let me go to Imperial College first. 5 days later, they finally reached Disabled Elderly Village. Qin Mu first went to find Hu Linga, and a few white foxes came out of her room, speaking the human language. Young master, big sister has gone to Eternal Peace Empire to look for you, and she has been gone for a few months. Qin Mu inquired about the details, and the white fox in the lead said, Great Demon King came to force big sister to marry him, so she beat him up. Great Demon King then called his dad over who big sister couldn't defeat, so she ran away, saying she would find young master in Eternal Peace Empire. Qin Mu bade farewell and brought everyone toward Disabled Elderly Village. When it came in sight, Qin Mu became excited and shouted out loudly, Grandpa Village Chief, Grandpa Apothecary, I'm back. Xiong Shiyu looked at this small village and saw an old man with a scraggly beard sitting on a recliner at the village entrance. He had no arms or legs, and the beard on his face was very unkempt. His hair was messy as well. There was a flock of chickens patrolling in the village, looking very awe-inspiring. Oh, Mua is back? You've grown taller again. The messy old man swayed in his recliner, looking at Xiong Shiyu and the 2 white bats while basking in the sun. After a moment, his expression changed to that of astonishment. This girl is very pretty and her cultivation is also very strong. A pity she's poisoned. The 2 white bats are a little interesting. The 2 white bats went to hang upside down from the tree above his head and sized village chief with interest. You're very strong as well. Qin Mu couldn't help frowning upon examining village chief. He then ran into the village to fetch a pig slaughtering knife before going into Granny-sized room to find a white cloth and coming back. In a basin of hot water, he wetted the towel, then covered village chief's face. After a while, Qin Mu uncovered the towel and used a pig slaughtering knife to help him shave his beard. Village chief, where are the people from the village? Grandpa Apothecary? He's not in the village? Take a look, your beard is almost dragging on the floor. Apothecary had ran away. Village chief sighed and said, a few women found their way here and scared him off, leaving me here alone. I don't have any limbs so I can't crawl back into the room. Qin Mu jumped in shock and cried out, Village chief, how long have you stayed here at the village entrance? Almost 2 months. Qin Mu was speechless. This old man had actually not moved for 2 months, staying at the village entrance motionlessly, allowing himself to be windswept and battered by rain, even letting the darkness surround him. This should be considered as having achieved a new realm in laziness. Xiong Shiyu also jumped in shock. From the layout of the stone statues in the village, the rays from them wouldn't have shone until here. Then this messy old man who had lain here for 2 months without dying, was he a god? Or were the strange things in the darkness not interested in him? Qin Mu shaved off village chief's beard and washed his face for him. He then cut off his messy white hair and groomed him before carrying the old man into his room, changing the clothes on his body into a new set before going to wash the old ones. He then carried the old man out to place him back on the recliner, pouring a pot of tea for him before asking, Grandpa Ma and the rest haven't returned. Old Ma came back once. Dao Master and Old Rulai had also found their way over. The latter said he wasn't Rulai anymore and severed one of his arms. He told me that he couldn't return Old Ma his children, but he could still return him an arm. Qin Mu cried out, Old Rulai severed his own arm. That's right. Old Rulai's arm was pecked at by the hen dragons. It's in the chicken coop, though, since the hen dragon couldn't eat it. Village chief sighed. Old Ma may look cold and hate the world, but when Old Rulai severed his arm to give it to him, he was still moved and cried. He went to Great Thunderclap Monastery to oversee it, saying that he would return once a new Rulai came. I reckon he won't be coming back. He plans to wait for the new Rulai, but once he will sit down on the seat of Rulai, he will discover that is Rulai. In a daze, Qin Mu said, I'm going to Ghost Valley, so I can find him on the way there. Where's Grandpa Cripple? Isn't he always inseparable from Grandpa Ma? They are inseparable, so he naturally went to be a guest at Great Thunderclap Monastery. He said he was afraid that old Ma would be at a disadvantage. Village chief revealed a worried expression. I'm afraid that after old Ma becomes Rulai, he will discover that his entire mountain is an illusion. Qin Mu also didn't see Butcher, Blind, and Mute, so he asked about them as well. Blind and Butcher had run off with old Dao Master and old Rulai, saying that they wanted to take a look at Little Jade Capital. Mute didn't seem to have had any plans to leave the village, but just before the day Apothecary escaped, Mute suddenly went crazy, picking up his belongings and rushing into the darkness, chasing after something. He had yet to return. Granny Sai hadn't yet returned. She had to still be at Eternal Peace Empire, suppressing her heart devil and sharpening her nature. Qin Mu tidied up the village and put all treasures and things that looked like treasures into his 2 Daotai sacks. He then came to the herb garden at the village entrance and stretched his hand out. Flying swords stabbed into the surroundings and tunneled underground, slicing something underneath the soil. Qin Mu raised both his hands as if lifting something, then the entire herb garden flew upwards and was put into Pan Gongso's Daotai sack. It was much better than Qin Mu's own, and the space inside could even store a piece of land. Qin Mu picked Apothecary's herb basket and placed Village Chief inside it. Village Chief was instantly angered. Rascal, what are you doing? Put me down. I can't let you stay here. Qin Mu tightened the herb basket to his back while saying, what if something happens to you, who will know? From now on, Grandpa Village Chief will follow me wherever I go. Village Chief was silent for a moment, slightly moved in his heart. He smiled. Put me down. Silly child, I'm old, I can't move around anymore. I even promised Yama to go to his living realm of the dead after death. When I die, a bird god will come and fetch me. Qin Mu instantly felt the herb basket becoming incomparably heavy, as though he was carrying a mountain. He knew Village Chief wasn't willing to leave Great Ruins and blinked before saying, doesn't Grandpa Village Chief want to meet Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor? Does the old Sword God not want to meet the new Sword God? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is being acclaimed as the saint that appears once every 500 years, so he is definitely worth meeting. The herb basket on Qin Mu's back instantly became lighter, and Village Chief's tone seemed to gain a hint of heroism. The new Sword God? Oh well, it's also a good thing to meet him before I die. Go, let us meet Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Sea of Blood. In Great Thunderclap Monastery, the bell rang non-stop. It was the bell to welcome visitors. While Qin Mu carrying Village Chief up the mountain, he saw a dignified Rulai leading all the monks to welcome them. At this moment, the youth was slightly depressed. The cold-faced yet heartwarming Ma Wangshan had still become the Rulai of Great Thunderclap Monastery, a Buddha. Old Ma couldn't let go of the place he had grown up in, even if the monks from there had killed his wife and children. It was not old Rulai's intention, after all, just what the monks under him had done. He was old Rulai's disciple, so the two of them knew each other very well. Old Rulai was old and couldn't control the monks under him anymore. The Arhats of Arhat Cloister had gone down the mountains with monks from other cloisters, and so old Ma's wife and children had lost their lives. Old Rulai severed his arm and gave it to him. Even though this wouldn't resolve the hatred in his heart, he still had to succeed his master's cassock and arms bowl. He couldn't let Great Thunderclap Monastery disappear just like this. When he returned to his homeland and sat on the throne of Rulai, the wind swept azure clouds past his body. When that wind dispersed, he suddenly achieved true enlightenment, breaking through the last realm of Rulai's Mahayana Sutra and succeeding in cultivating Brahma. From Sakra to Brahma was a moment of enlightenment, kind of perfect awakening. On the golden peak of Great Thunderclap Monastery, Qin Mu looked at old Ma, who had educated him on how to be an adult and had all kinds of emotions in his heart. In the end, he called him senior brother. This Rulai of Great Thunderclap Monastery had cultivated to the highest realm, the realm of Brahma. His corporeal body, spiritual sense, and Tat Hota were perfected and had 20 heavens behind him, with Brahma sitting in the lotus position while gods and Buddhas of all sizes surrounded him, giving off radiance like perpetual daytime, looking sacred and merciful. Senior brother, Old Ma greeted him in return. Qin Mu face turned dim. Now that Old Ma was sitting in this position, he was no longer the Old Ma from the past, he was Rulai. He had to put down his worldly affairs and let the four elements be vanity. Cripple was nearby. Even though he had said he would just go to attend the ceremony, he had actually been worried about Old Ma's safety. He was afraid that the monks of Great Thunderclap Monastery would harm him. However, now that Old Ma had cultivated to the highest realm in Rulai's Mahayana Sutra, there was no need for protection, so Cripple was also itching to move. There were treasures everywhere in this Great Thunderclap Monastery, and they made this old rogue unable to sit still. He wanted to steal, but he wouldn't be able to face his conscience then, so when he saw Qin Mu and village chief, he couldn't resist suggesting to leave as soon as possible. Qin Mu wanted to stay for a few days, but when night came, he saw bright lights coming from the north, the Qingmen Pass. With such glorious lights lighting the sky, one thing was certain, the battle at Qingmen Pass was very intense. Beside Qingmen Pass was Ghost Valley where the two white bats lived. It wasn't considered too far from Great Thunderclap Monastery. Early next morning, Qin Mu bade farewell and brought village chief, Xiao Shiyu, Cripple, and the rest to leave. When I met Old Ma, he was the most famous constable in the world known as Divine Constable Ma. He almost caught me. Cripple looked back at the golden peak of Mount Meru, which was shining brilliantly as resonating Buddha voices rang in the air. They materialized into words, into a lotus, and into apparitions of Buddhas surrounding the sacred ground. Cripple fell into a daze and said in a low voice, "He caught me many times, and we fought many times. The one I was afraid of and respected the most was him. When I was young, I was an orphan with nothing at all, begging for food everywhere. When I couldn't endure my hunger, I would steal. I didn't dare to snatch cause I was thin and frail. Sometime later, I was caught by an old constable who didn't send me to see the official and only made me stop stealing. He taught me crafts and was like a father to me. I followed him and fantasized about being a constable like him one day. Old Ma reminds me of him. I feel like Old Ma looks especially like him when he's stern." Qin Mu sat on the dragon Chilin's back, not saying anything as he listened to Cripple talking about his past with village chief and the rest. I didn't have a dad, so I always felt that the old constable was my dad. During the years I followed him, I was especially hard-working and happy. But one day, the old constable died. Cripple's eyes relaxed, and his tone became calmer. At midnight, his enemies came to find him. I was asleep then, but shouts from outside woke me up. He barged into my room and sent me out of the house with his life. He told me, "Child, be a good man. Run." I wasn't wearing any clothes then, so I just ran butt naked. I ran and ran until my speed became faster and faster, faster and faster. I cried for help but no one came, no one. A thin, frail, and butt-naked boy had been helplessly running, crying for help, yet no one came to help him. Cripple ran from night until day and covered over 10,000 miles. When he came to his sense, he returned to the residence of the old constable, but it had already been razed to the ground. He could only dig out the charred bones of the old constable. He wanted me to be a good man like he'd been throughout his life, but how had he ended up? I don't want to be a good man. He didn't want me to steal, so I shall steal. In a lonely voice, Cripple continued, "I stole while I ran, and as I did that, my reputation ran louder and louder until I was referred to as thief god by the people. All the bullshit seals and forbidden arts were nothing in my eyes. I ran past the wind, past the clouds, past the lightning, and stole throughout the whole world. Whatever sect, whatever sacred ground, I stole from all of them. At one point, I found his enemies and stole their heads. When I paid my respects to the old constable again and wanted to become a good man, I had already caught the bad habit of stealing, and no matter what I did, I couldn't quit. After that, I met Old Ma. He reminded me of the old constable, so I feared him a bit, and I respected him. Now that he has become Rulai, his merciful look reminds me if the old constable had become a Buddha." Village chief popped his head out from the herb basket. "Old Ma won't become Buddha. When a new Rulai comes one day, he will take down his cassock and become the Old Ma from the past." Cripple raised his head to gaze at the sky. I hope so. Qin Mu let out a shaky breath and said in a low voice, Old Ma will definitely come back. Along this journey, he had gotten rid of the poison in Xiong Shiyu's body and even prescribed a few types of spirit pills to nourish her vital qi. After that, they finally came to Ghost Valley, and the two white bats flew into the ravines of Ghost Valley. They hung down on one tree and bade farewell to Qin Mu and the rest. Cult Master, come over and play when you're free, we won't eat you, Fu Yuqiu said. Qin Mu laughed loudly and waved goodbye. The two white bats immediately flew into Ghost Valley while shouting, let's wake the old ancestors up and make them give birth to a few girls so we can breed. Even if they give birth to them, they'll be our great-grandmas, so how are we going to breed? Furthermore, what if both of the old ancestors are male? Shut up. The dragon Qilin left Ghost Valley, and they soon came to a battlefield that unfolded before them on a magnificent scale. The forest in the Ducktongue Zone had already been razed to the ground. Ducktongue Zone stretched throughout close to 1,000 miles, and the woodland and mountainous region had all been flattened by the two parties, becoming the battlefield of Barbarian Di Empire and Eternal Peace Empire. When Qin Mu and the rest came to this place, a large-scale battle was on the way. Tens of thousands of soldiers in the mountain passes on both sides were rushing forward with their earth-shattering divine arts. Huge strange beasts stepped forth and brought countless divine arts practitioners with them, once they landed on their backs. Below the mountain-sized strange beasts were martial arts practitioners wielding knives and swords. They rushed forward frantically and collided with the enemies on land. In a split second, flesh and blood filled the sky. Above the heads of the strange beasts, flying ships filled the sky, their flags fluttering. Cannons fired for days on end, and lines of light that were as thick as water barrels bombarded the enemy army with destructive force, vaporizing everything they touched. There were also countless knife and sword pellets spinning rapidly in midair, the lights from which pierced flesh. There were also some great shamans of Roland's Golden Palace who had transformed into golden-colored bird-headed mutants. Once they flapped their wings and shook their hands, countless rays shot off in all directions. On the ground, there were golden elephant-headed giants charging forward furiously. On both sides of the mountain passes were huge mirrors that shone into the sky, on the souls of divine arts practitioners. Next to them were huge flags that swept to the side and changed the wind and clouds, causing lightning to rain down on the battlefield. There were also huge cloud chariots being pulled by topless giants into the battlefield and causing blood and flesh to fly wherever they went. Upon reaching the front line of the battlefield, the giants suddenly stopped the cloud chariots and opened them up. Countless bottle gourds were placed within them, and when the chariots were opened, venomous insects burst out and covered the sun and the sky. They entered the bodies of the enemy army to gnaw on them. There were also sacrificial altars that got pushed out, and the golden great shamans of Roland's Golden Palace cast some kind of shaman spells to kill the generals of Eternal Peace Empire, causing the opposite side to have no leader. Eternal Peace Empire, in the meantime, had sent out groups of divine arts practitioners that were proficient in sword techniques to cut their way through thistles and thorns into the battlefield to kill the golden great shamans on the sacrificial altars. This sight was truly shocking. Both sides had obviously killed numerous people, for the flowing blood had turned into a river, turning Ducktongue Zone into something like hell. It was Qin Mu's first time seeing such a grand spectacle, and his heart palpitated. This was the battlefield of men, the place where men died. While carrying Xiong Shiyu, whose face was pale, asked in a low voice, "How do we cross such a place? My cultivation has not yet recovered." She had only recovered to the standard of celestial being realm, and in this kind of battlefield, the strength of a celestial being realm was simply insignificant. In the battlefield, a strong practitioner of this realm could die at any moment under a killing formation formed by soldiers of 7 stars realm. Even strong practitioners of life and death realm would find it hard to protect their lives if they just barged through a battlefield like this. Xiong Shiyu was an existence of cult master level, and upon looking over, she could see that whenever 30 to 50 people gathered together, formation markings would light up. These formations markings would either be on the ground or floating in the air, changing continuously. It showed that even though the battlefield was big, and there were many people, the formations were never messed up. If someone barged in, they would be minced by a battle formation, and even if one didn't kill them, they would be killed by another one after taking a couple of steps. Qin Mu tightened the herb basket on his back, and in the herb basket, village chief smiled. Just walk over. Mua. You have mastered Sword of Founding Emperor Sea of Blood, right? Let me execute it once more for you to see. Qin Mu's heart moved slightly, and boundless sword lights burst forth toward the fighting. In a split second, they shrouded the battlefield in front of the two mountain passes, bathing the countless soldiers in the sea of swords. Those sword lights circled and coiled around them, making them not dare to make the slightest movement. Most of the soldiers standing on the two mountain passes felt their scalps crawl as they looked down. The place had become a sea of sword lights, and everyone was drowned within it. Beat the gong to recall the troops, people shouted out from the city towers on both sides. However, everyone in the battlefield stood still, not daring to move. None of the troops retreated, and even the flying ships in the sky froze in place. If they moved, it would mean death. If these sword lights moved, there would be a sea of blood. An expert has arrived. On the city tower of Qingmen Pass, a middle-aged man walked out and looked down to see a huge dragon Qilin walking unhurriedly through the sea of sword lights. Imperial Preceptor, all of the soldiers greeted the man in the tower. The middle-aged man on the city tower had a pale white face, and it was obvious he had injuries which were yet to heal. This middle-aged man was none other than Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor who had been injured in a battle with a god. Even though Qin Mu and Little Poison King Fu Yuanqing had worked together to cure him, he had still been wounded by a god, so he was yet to recover. Barbarian Di Empire had taken this chance to invade Eternal Peace. The situation at Qingmen Pass was of utmost importance. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor knew that Eternal Peace Empire had suffered great losses in strength after two huge calamities, and in addition to that, he and Emperor Yangfeng had yet to recover to their peak strength. Emperor Yanfeng's injuries were even heavier than his. He was afraid of barbarian Di Empire barging straight in, so he had mobilized the troops to guard Qingmen Pass to the death. He even didn't hesitate to personally come to the battlefield to command the army. When village chief unleashed his swords, the shocking sight of one sword suppressing the struggles on the whole battlefield caught his eye. Actually, this wasn't a simple shocking sight. Instead, it was having the ability to turn the entire battlefield into a sea of blood, intimidating the soldiers and cavalry on both sides. The lives of everyone on the battlefield laid in his hands. This kind of sword skill was no longer part of sword skills, but closer to a profound path. This let Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor see an even higher level, the level of the sword path. The sword lights unleashed village chief's move were uncountable, but the truly terrifying thing was that the movement of each and every sword light was different, restraining every martial and divine art practitioner. This was something that was nearly impossible. There were tens of thousands of people on the battlefield, and the cultivation of each and every person was different. The martial and divine arts they learned also had differences. Furthermore, with the battle formations having a myriad of changes, if he wanted to restrain everyone, he had to restrain all of their divine arts, martial arts, spirit weapons as well as formations. The number of things to be calculated was at an unimaginable level. To be able to reach such a level, one could be called God, the God of the Sword. Sword of Founding Emperor Sea of Blood, I've seen this kind of sword skill before. It was in the painting of Art Saint. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor focused his gaze toward the dragon Qilin and saw Qin Mu and the rest standing on the creature's back. Even though these people were all very strong, they didn't catch his attention. I could see the extremes of sword skill from that painting, and I had studied the sword technique of the man in the painting for the past 200 years. I would have new gains whenever I observed this painting for a long time. When I no longer could see anything new, I thought I had already reached his level. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor reminisced about the painting and tried to look for the man in the painting, but he couldn't find him. His gaze then landed on Qin Mu's back. The youth was carrying a herb basket within which he could see a white-haired old man that had no limbs. This old man didn't look like the man in the painting. That person was a sword god in his heyday. His acute spirit burst forth like a sword that had just drunk blood. The old man in the herb basket, however, was in the last of his days. He looked as if his light could be extinguished at any moment. There was no sight on him of the high spirits of the sword god in the painting. However, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was certain that this handicapped old man was the sword god from back then. After all, the enlightenment for his sword skills came from the sword god in the painting. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's body trembled slightly, and he let out a shaky breath before instructing the people around him, "Welcome the guests." The city gates opened, and the soldiers in the city lined up on both sides. The dragon Qin walked in with his head held high. At that moment, all the sword lights in the battlefield poured over like a flood at Qin Mu, going into the herb basket behind his back. Village chief popped his head out and saw a middle-aged person coming over to welcome him. He was the man who was said to be the saint that appears once every 500 years, the man that was said to be the #1 practitioner under the gods, the man that was acclaimed to be the current generation sword god. The gaze of the two people met, and ripples billowed in their hearts. The sword god of the previous generation and the sword god of the current generation had finally met. Next to the battlefield, the beating of a bronze gong came from the city towers on both mountain passes. It was the sound of retreat, sending orders to the soldiers on the battlefield to withdraw. The tens of thousands of soldiers felt as if a huge burden had been lifted off their shoulders. Everyone instantly felt their bodies drenched in sweat. In Qin Mu Pass, village chief, who had been in the herb basket, flew out. As if he had grown arms and legs, he walked toward Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and the two strongest men of their respective generations met. "You have learned sword?" Village chief asked. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor did a disciple greeting and said respectfully, "Disciple has learned sword in his early years, but haven't done that since reaching 160 years old." "You understood sword at 160 years old?" Village chief asked. "I had read extensively through all the techniques and ultimate arts in the world and comprehended boundless divine arts, thus I understood sword and started to create my own sword skills," Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor answered solemnly. Village chief smiled. "Display your sword skills for me." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor drew his sword, and sword light filled the heaven, lighting up the world. His sword skills had countless changes, were as complicated as the numerous stars in the sky, yet simple like the counting rods. Some were straight, some were winding, as if they could transform into all the skills in the world, giving others an indescribable feeling. There was a kind of bearing that pressed forward in his sword skills, a spirit that was like a blazing fire tearing through the bright flowers coming from the reform. It seemed to want to set all the things in the world ablaze, changing the inherent heaven and earth, the never-changing great Tao, to reform everything that is trite, tear open and reveal the ugly faces of the degenerates of the old generation. This man wanted to use his sword to change the empty and trite paths of this world, to open up new paths and let the world enter a new age. His sword skills had already surpassed technique and become skills which incorporated his philosophy. Just one step, and he could reach the realm of the path. With philosophy, life was given to sword skills, so his sword skills already had life. Since the path was in front of philosophy, only by surpassing it could he see the path. With only a step forward, he would be able to see the path. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor pulled his sword back and gasped for breath. His injuries were still not yet healed, so his cultivation wasn't like it was before. However, before the previous generation sword god, he was like a student wishing to show his most perfect sword skill and looking forward to hearing his evaluation. "Superb sword skills," village chief praised. "No doubt you're the #1 man under the gods, the saint that appears once every 500 years. Before death, I have finally met someone who I can interact with. I've come out this time just to meet you, to let you witness the path." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor then said solemnly, "Today at Qin Mu Pass, there are 1,000,000 soldiers stationed, many of whom are my students, however, I'm your student. There are also numerous scholars from Imperial College who had come here to lend their strength in the face of the Empire's disaster, so may teacher please expound his wisdom and dispel our doubts." Village chief smiled. "I dare not, it's just an interaction." The two of them walked side by side with Qin Mu following behind them. Xiong Xiu raised her head to look at a man approaching old age and a man at his robust years with a bizarre gaze while saying under her breath, "In my West Earth's true heaven palace, there are no such outstanding men." With the women of our West Earth in charge, the men are all yes men, doing whatever they are told to do. If the men of West Earth were as bold and as capable as them, why would us women need to be in charge? They walked into the city, and Qin Mu saw numerous scholars from Imperial College. All of them were sitting cross-legged and waiting quietly. They were unable to hide the excitement that was on their faces. Now that barbarian DI Empire was launching a full-scale invasion on Eternal Peace Empire after it had just gone through a massive rebellion and snow disaster, there was no way for people to make a living. The population was declining, and the people were mostly destitute and homeless. Before the empire could settle down, the rations were also in short supply. Even in the army, the rations were lacking, so many scholars from Imperial College could only save on food after coming here, not daring to eat till they were full. Qin Mu saw Wei Yong, Qin Yu, and the rest. Wei Yong was originally a big fatty, but now he had slimmed down quite a bit from starvation. Only when they reached fall's harvest could this hard-pressed situation turn slightly better. Village Chief and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor sat down, and Village Chief said in a pace that was neither too fast nor too slow, "The purpose of my visit is not to talk about sword skills. I shall only talk about the path. The sword path. As for how much you can take from my speech, it will depend on your comprehension. There was no such thing as a sword path in this world before, but ever since weapons such as a sword were created, a sword path came to be. Numerous soldiers that had come back from the front lines walked over. Some of them took off their armor to sit on the ground while some just stood and listened. Many people revealed puzzled expressions when they heard the lecture of this elder. Someone said in a low voice, "Could the great Tao of heaven and earth be created? Aren't we divine arts practitioners cultivating the natural great Tao of heaven and earth?" Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly. He recalled his conversation with Heavenly King Yu about how the great Tao of heaven and earth had changed. The creativity of humans had born numerous great Tao of heaven and earth that didn't exist in the world at the start. It was also that same creativity that had changed the old Taos into something new. When a great Tao is changed, the skills would also change, thus it was known as a reform. Heavenly King Yu felt that reforms could touch the benefits of gods and devils. However, what Village Chief said was much more profound. Everyone was puzzled because they were all people who had cultivated Qi, and their inherent knowledge was to learn the paths, skills, and divine arts that were passed down to them. Furthermore, divine arts relied on a path and skills, so if they changed their inherent understanding, one could well imagine how big of a blow it would be to their hearts. "How is a great Tao created?" asked Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. "Walk to the extreme and it will be created." Imperial Preceptor, have your sword skills reached their extremes? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was slightly stunned and said, "Just a little more." Village Chief revealed a smile. "Let me help you." He stabbed at Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and the scenery around them changed. Thousands of mountains and rivers came flooding in his face, and in a split second, their surroundings no longer looked like Qingmen Pass or a battlefield with blood flowing in a red river. Instead, it looked like a whole new world that had fresh green mountain ranges overflowing with greenery, rivers rolling into the distance. Each and every wave looked extremely clear and real, while the veins of each and every leaf on the trees and bushes were complicated, without any two being alike. Everyone stood up, and there were even some people that climbed the mountains while some jumped into the river. There were even some that plucked the flowers formed by sword lights while Qin Mu stretched out his hand to catch a drop of dew trickling down from a leaf. Sword-treading mountains and rivers. This was the sword-treading mountains and rivers that Village Chief had executed. It was clearly a move that had supreme power, but in Village Chief's hand, it was completely harmless. Instead of dealing damage, it brought everyone into a bizarre world. It was as if this place was a real world, one formed by a sword path. Even though this situation had a huge impact on them, it was the strongest on Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. His body trembled, and his soul palpitated. He squatted and caressed the ground, then raised his head to look up at the starry sky. Village Chief had shown him the true face of the path, allowing him to touch the sword path. Suddenly, he felt that a door had been blown open, and he stood there motionlessly with a blank gaze. Village Chief saw this sight and exclaimed to himself, the saint that appears once every 500 years indeed has much better aptitude than Mu, comprehending the path in such a short time. Qin Mu's gaze landed on the dew on his fingertip. It left him slightly at a loss. A sword skill could actually reach such a level? The sword skill that village chief executed this time was different from those in the past. The sword treading mountains and rivers showed back then taught him how to execute the whole process flawlessly, allowing him to learn how to execute the sword skill. Even though the sword treading mountains and rivers this time was the same one he'd been taught, there was something additional in it that made it different. It was like executing the creation of heaven and earth to create all things. Dao Sect's Dao Sword used the method of algebra to analyze all things in nature, and then the 14 writings of Dao Sword recreated all things in nature, which gave it unimaginable power. The sword skill of village chief, however, seemed to have taken an opposite path. He was creating all things in the world while his sword skill to interpret them. It was hard to say which method was superior, but from a conceptual point of view, there was an obvious choice. Dao Sword worked under the expression of Dao follows the nature, while village chief's sword picture created nature, which showed that the conception of sword picture should be superior. Interpreting nature was a kind of learning from nature. Creation, on the other hand, was the act of making something out of nothing. Based on the summary of Dao Sect's teachings, the path produces 1, 1 produces 2, 2 produces 3, and 3 produce all things. Village chief's sword picture had mastered the path to produce all things. The Dao Sword of Dao Sect was interpreting all things, but exhausting all possibilities. Qin Mu focused his gaze on the drop of dew, which was sparkling and translucent, looking incomparably glossy. In the surface of the dew, he could actually see the reflection of boundless universes presenting themselves in fine detail. Cyan Heaven's eyes, awaken. Layers of formation marking swirled in Qin Mu's pupils, and with Cyan Heaven's eyes, he tried to see the fine sword lights which formed the dew. However, what disappointed him was that he couldn't see anything even with his skill. However, he noticed a marvelous point. The dew reflected external objects, and looking at it in detail, he could actually see even more details of the reflection. Through it, he looked at Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor who had entered some marvelous realm. His gaze may look blank, but when looking into his eyes through the dew, Qin Mu could see countless changes in the arrays of his eyes. By looking even deeper, he seemed to see a world produced inside the transformations of the arrays. Qin Mu stirred up his spirit and maintained the operation of Cyan Heaven's eyes. Looking over, he could see everything even more clearly, and the transformations of the arrays in Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's eyes seemed to open a new world, demonstrating the magic of creation. He had the feeling of being there personally, situated in the world that was born in Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's eyes. He was experiencing the comprehension of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. He was comprehending the sword path, and he was indeed a person brimming with talent. It was no wonder that Heavenly Devil Patriarch, Old Dao Master, and Old Rulai had sympathy for a talent such as him the moment they laid eyes on him and imparted the ultimate arts of their respective sacred grounds to him. Qin Mu was inferior to him in terms of comprehension and aptitude. When Imperial Preceptor first saw Village Chief's sword path, he was able to comprehend new things by analogy and grasp his own sword path. Faced with such a heaven-defying aptitude and talent, Qin Mu acknowledged that his own ability falling short. However, Qin Mu was currently using the dew's power to enter Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's state of comprehension, borrowing it to improve himself. Truly marvelousa. When Village Chief saw this, he sighed ruefully to Cripple. Even though Qin Mu's aptitude and comprehension aren't comparable to those of the saint that appears once every 500 years, but this kind of quick wit and diligence is not something the saint can match. Cripple was proud. As expected of the one I taught. It's as expected of the one we taught. Village Chief added as well. How do you view Imperial Preceptor? Can he be the human emperor? Cripple asked. Village Chief was silent for a moment, then said in a soft voice, "He's not inferior to me and might be even more outstanding than me in the future." Cripple looked at him with doubt. I know you never finish your sentences, but why don't you say what you want to say all at once? Village Chief sighed. I'm very strong and have reached the extreme of sword skills, but look at what severed my limbs, a sword. Cripple no longer said anything, so village chief continued, my limbs were severed by someone with a sword. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, this saint that appears once every 500 years, might be stronger than me, but if he doesn't have any chance meeting, he will be trapped on Divine Bridge realm like me. If he can't connect the Divine Bridge, there'll be no way to reach the other realm and he will just face the same end as me. Cripple's body trembled. He looked at Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor before turning to Qin Mu. With a questioning look, he asked in a low voice, after you and I die, if Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor also dies, what's going to happen to Qin Mu? I had originally wished for him to be an ordinary person, a normal person who will live a normal life. Yet he had exceeded my expectations time and again, destroying all my plans for him one after another. I can't be sure about his future. At first, I thought that he was an ordinary human, but ever since I went to search for Carefree Village, I became aware that he might have some extraordinary points. Cripple broke into a grin. Ordinary? Village chief, you're getting muddle-headed. Is there ever an ordinary overlord body? Mua is the overlord body, so how is he ordinary? Village chief's expression froze, and he gave a forced laugh before continuing, that's right, I've forgotten that he's the overlord body, so it's natural for him to do stuff that is out of the ordinary. Yet he still exceeded my expectations this time. I thought he would comprehend some profound stuff from my sword path, yet he saw the process of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's comprehension in that drop of dew. This is too. He didn't know how to continue. Cripple laughed. Too inconceivable. Village chief nodded, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. It's indeed too inconceivable. Mua, this little fellow, I thought he would never awaken his spirit embryo, yet he did it. I thought he would be stuck on spirit embryo realm and never progress, yet he found the follow-up technique of Overlord Body. Ehem, Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique. I thought he would be like everyone else, yet he defeated all 360 Hall Masters of Heavenly Devil Cult and became their young cult master. I thought he wouldn't be able to learn what we teach him, yet he learned very well, with a momentum that surpasses us. He smiled bitterly. I thought I would never acknowledge him and never hand my legacy down to him, yet I acknowledged him and imparted my legacy to him. I even handed my burden and responsibility to him. He reminisced about the past with a feeling of wanting to laugh. At first, I didn't trust him and didn't think he could accomplish anything extraordinary, yet every time he raises my expectations higher and higher. In the end, I realized that is still the one I trust the most. In truth, as we raised him up, we also grew from that. Cripple asked with a smile, what you're trying to say is? Village chief's wrinkles gathered together on his forehead, and he revealed a sincere smile from the depths of his heart. What I mean is that in comparison to Imperial Preceptor, I think more highly of Mua, who we all raised together. The child that was given to us by Surging River in the darkness 15 years ago was born extraordinary. His aptitude isn't as astonishing as that of Imperial Preceptor, and his comprehension isn't as heaven-defying, but there's something about him that I can't see through. It's Overlord Body, Cripple said excitedly. The smile on Village Chief's face froze, and he had a myriad of emotions as he muttered, maybe it's because of Overlord Body. An ordinary person creating a miracle once might be by chance, twice might be by luck, but after 3 or 4 times, it won't be chance or luck anymore. Instead, he is indeed different from others, an Overlord Body that's worth our respect. Our Mua has inherited the good points of us failures who have hidden in great ruins and learned from our lessons. He will definitely be able to walk farther than any of us. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor comprehended the path, his understanding growing deeper and deeper. With a drop of dew to peek at him comprehending the path, Qin Mu managed to see the entire process as it happened. With Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor comprehending the sword path, he would gain a lot of benefits due to the man being on a way higher realm than him. Even though Qin Mu was still at the primary stage of skill, by borrowing Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor comprehending path, he could peek into the stage of sword path. The benefits he gained from that were unimaginable. Compared to a giant like Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, Qin Mu was only a small child. Yet this small child could stand on the shoulders of this giant to attain a wider horizon. Even though all the people in Qingmen Pass were comprehending Village Chief's sword treading mountains and rivers, those that were able to grasp the paramount marvel within it were few and far between. Most of them could comprehend a move or two, and it may be extraordinary enough for them to last the rest of their lives, but there was absolutely no one that had received as huge a benefit as Qin Mu. It was equivalent to learning about paramount marvels in regards to the sword from village chief and imperial preceptor, these two great sword gods. After a long time, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor woke up from comprehending the path, and there was an indescribable bearing about him. Upon reaching the highest peak, all mountains could be held within a single glance. Now that he had stepped onto the peak of sword skill, looking at all the sword skills and divine arts in the world gave him a sense of depression. There were no more sword skills and divine arts in this world that could light up his eyes. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor revealed a sorrowful expression, but soon after, he noticed something different. He could actually feel someone peeking at him, into his Tao heart, into him comprehending the path. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was astonished and looked toward the source, his gaze landing on Qin Mu. He was stunned for a moment, then broke out laughing while shaking his head. I see, Heavenly Saint Cult Master is really great at using others for his own gain. Qin Mu immediately felt his gaze. There was a light sting in his eyes, and he immediately redirected his gaze. When their gazes crossed paths, Qin Mu revealed a radiant smile. Heavenly King, sorry to disturb you. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor smiled in return. No worries. Suddenly, the mountains and rivers dispersed as all sword lights vanished. Village Chief pulled back his sword lights and said to Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, you have already attained the path. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor bowed to express his thanks. If not for Tao Brother's guidance, I still wouldn't know when I would be able to enter the realm of the path. The arms and legs of Village Chief that were formed by vital chi dispersed automatically as he said, come forward and take a look at the severed section of my arms and legs. I had always left these sword scars alone, never erasing them. In the future, you might meet the god that left me these wounds. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor walked forward solemnly, squatting down to examine the wounds in detail. What he saw were sword scars which had been left behind on old human emperor by a sword that was stronger than his. A practitioner proficient in sword had been injured by the sword. In Imperial Preceptor's eyes, Village Chief's sword skills had already reached the realm of the path, which meant they were above his. It's just that his chi and blood were exhausted and not flourishing like his. Yet from these injuries, he could see sword skills and a sword path that was even stronger. Do you have confidence in defeating him? Village Chief asked. Not now. However, I might in the future. You imparted your sword path to me and you are also the enlightenment of my sword skills, so you are my teacher. Thus, would you hand the burden that you're carrying to me? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor asked with a grim face. Village Chief shook his head and smiled. There's no need to hand it to you, I have already given it to someone else. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's heart trembled violently, but then he came to a sudden realization. He looked at Qin Mu and asked in a low voice, the new human emperor. This video is end here. Like the video and subscribe to my channel.